Hello again, folks. Welcome to episode 3 of the Common Collective podcast. Today we have an amazing episode again for you. Super interesting topic. You're going to love this guest of ours, Christopher McCracken. Known the guy for quite some time. Uh, and today we're going to dive into some mystical, secretive knowledge that hopefully you'll find interesting. So sit back and enjoy the episode. All right, folks, welcome to episode 3 of the Common Collective podcast. I am your host, Anthony Chisholm. We have our other host, Coach JQ, aka Jeff Cabral, here with us as well.
What's up?
We have our guest today, Chris McCracken. Gentlemen,
Hello.
how are you guys doing today?
You're good. Yeah. I was like, who's gonna go first?
Sorry, I probably should have set that up a little bit.
But based on the laughter, man, I think all is well, all is good.
Absolute. Well, Chris, thanks for joining us today. I think this is going to be by far one of the most interesting episodes that we get to do. So I'm really looking forward to it today.
Don't set it up too much.
What's that?
Don't set it up too much.
Well, I think this is actually, and it's so odd that now, out of the existence of the planet, like we've kind of come full circle with this topic, and the fact that it's, I mean, in my opinion, kind of a hot topic because it's got a lot of attention on social media. That it's come back around. It almost seems a bit archaic, but at the same time, like we have so much more, like I guess, a logical way of approaching it, and so much more information and insight as to why the flat Earth theory actually it can be the reality that we live in versus this round ball that we live on. And this absolutely fascinates me. I will admit it. I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And so like this kind of stuff is like right up my alley. So I'm definitely excited for it to dive into it.
It's funny. It's funny that you say it's like you refer to it as like archaic. I'm sure a lot of people probably that first comes into their head, and one of the facts of that is I believe it's the whole concept of, oh well, now we have these new people with these high technology, and so now we are smarter. And the scientists that talk to us today and tell us what's up are more intelligent than they were back in the day because of all of this technology. Therefore, all of the findings and theories back in the day are kind of like, cavemanish like type of thinking because they didn't have the technology. But it's just the whole that's all part of, like, in my opinion, part of the propaganda and mind prep of the information that they're feeding to you.
Right. And the reason why I say archaic is because that was the original belief that, we did live on a flat earth, and that, if you sailed too far in one direction, you'd fall off the side of it. And I just find that very entertaining to think about it like that, because that does seem so, for lack of a better term, preposterous, right? But again, just like you said, totally agree. Like the evidence that we have doesn't necessarily like denounce that is total, what's the word I'm looking for, guys? Come on. But it's not that it can't be not true, or untrue. So I think I like I said, I just find that really interesting that everybody said it back then, and then somehow we came across the idea of no, it's actually round, and we're just hanging in space and all this kind of stuff. The other part that I like, go ahead.
Since it's your show, just curious, where do you stand on it at this point? Just on your own studies and stuff?
I have not done a lot of study. Like honestly, the reason why we're here is because um, of your Facebook activity, right? And the fact that we're friends, and like I follow all the stuff that you post, especially on chemtrails. I'm on board with you on that 100%. But honestly, with flat Earth, I have zero real knowledge other than what I read. But I've not done any real solid research myself. I think I
Right.
watched a couple of YouTube videos for the voice boxes of that that movement and that that thought. But I'm honestly no knowledge at all, so I'm coming into this like kind of
How
fresh.
about you?
Yeah, man, this whole thing is super fascinating. I mean, my personal knee jerk reaction to all this was, man, they got to be smoking some good stuff. Uh, and part of me is like, hey, I kind of want some, you know, but more so because I'm just really curious. What is the tipping point to where people are actually, number one, believing in it, and then number two, creating a massive movement about it, you know?
Mhm.
And ironically enough, the more I see it around, and I naturally start questioning, right? I mean, that's just kind of my personal human nature, is where I like challenging the status quo, questioning it, seeing both sides. I'm really curious. I'll stick my head over on the other side of the fence and see what's up. Um, I guess part of that too is kind of a little bit of ego, just kind of a self affirmation, like, oh yeah, I'm right. But there's that small ounce of, hey, I could be proven wrong, and I just want to know both sides. And it's really interesting. I actually brought this topic up with a good friend of mine here. He's actually my mentor up here in Southern Oregon. And I mentioned to him, like, oh, he was calling me yesterday actually during the podcast, and I was like, sorry, brother, like, yeah, it was a 3 hour podcast. He was like, what the heck were you guys talking about? And I was like, oh, just family, God, and that. And he was like, oh, okay, well, what are you doing tomorrow? Another podcast. Well, what's it about? Flat Earth. Just kind of really reluctant. He was like, oh, dude. And this is like old school salty dog type of guy, right? And I thought he was just gonna be like, oh man, that's really stupid. And he started going off like, dude, have you ever checked out Google Earth? And up in Antarctica, there's you could pinpoint a car right in front of your street, but you can't focus on certain parts of the earth or whatever. And
Uh-huh.
then he started getting into hollow earth theory, and then he went up to saying there's a thing called Google Moon, and you can zoom in, but you can't find or see the American flag that we supposedly planted on there. But long story short, it's just hearing all these things, and yeah, I mean, I've done zero research on other than what's kind of served in front of my eyes on social media. um, I mean, it's really uncomfortable, right? You go through school your whole life, and it totally makes sense. Whether it's the truth or whether it's the fabricated truth, this whole global system and universe and orbits and all that totally makes sense, right? But I'm humbled because on a different topic altogether, but with the same mindset, like for instance, this whole vaccine thing, right? Which could be a whole nother podcast in itself. But I'm all about medical freedom, and all these people who are saying like, oh, scientists or science proves this and this is the data. I'm always like, well, science and data is always just a snapshot of the moment, right? It's just a moment of truth in this time right now. As what Chris alluded to earlier, as we get further along in advances in technology, we're allowed to get more and more data and form better and better conclusions. So it's really humbling to sit back and realize, like, well, okay, there's this flat Earth theory, and our technology is getting better, and you know what? It's at time and time again we have to be open to reconsider uh, uh, different conclusions, I guess, or whether it reinforces an old idea or it introduces a new one. It's just that I don't have any scientific, or for this part, I guess, biblical data that supports the notion of flat Earth. So I'm here
Yeah.
with
Yeah,
open ears, and yeah, man,
and
I'm
we
I'm fascinated.
take this into consideration too. How often has science been wrong? Like what
All the
Amen.
time.
Amen.
exactly.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? So we hold science to this standard as a society where if science says it's this way, then it's true. Let's take a look at just this pandemic, right? That we're all living in. So the death tolls are dramatically less than what they had originally stated. The severe like the severity of it is not questionable, right?
Yeah.
I just talked with a firefighter buddy of mine who is in LA, so he's like in the thick of it, and he's constantly exposed on a daily basis, right? And yes, we were kind of social distancing as we played Modern Warfare last night at church. So, so um, I was talking with him, and something interesting. I'm pretty sure I had it, and he said he hasn't gotten tested, but he most definitely said he had it, and so did his wife, and it was back in January, right before this
Uh-huh.
this thing had like exploded, right? And so I think my kid had it. So this is like four people that literally can confirm the similar symptoms, and they all feel like the flu, but it was really bad. Like I've had the flu before, but this was totally off and super weird. And the only reason why I believe I had it is because on I caught this video of this guy who had COVID, and he was saying he was kind of going through his symptoms, and he said at first he felt like he was getting a little bit of a cold, and I was like, oh, okay. I thought that might have just been allergies because I was out in the yard and doing some yard work, and then like I started getting sick, like I had the congestion and like I just felt kind of crummy, sore throat, whatever. And then it got better after a couple of days, right? So pretty normal. And then my kid got sick, and she's a really good patient. And so using her as a litmus test, I had to go pick her up from school. I had to physically pick her up and carry her to the car because she just couldn't walk.
Oh wow.
She came home, and like if she's got the stomach flu, she'll throw up and she'll get up, she'll start playing, and then she starts feeling sick again. She'll and she bounces back really quick because she's young. She's got a very healthy immune system, right? And she's just got that youth factor going for her. So my kid literally was sitting on the couch or in bed, wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. I mean, like she was dead to the world, like no expression. She wasn't crying, no emotion, like nothing. Like she was just like this zombie, right? She did not feel good at all. I was too. Like I like had this fever where I was kind of like little delusional, almost hallucinating, kind of thing. And the chills were the worst part. Like and like I was, my fever was so like gnarly that I was having, it was kind of making me nauseous a little bit, and I'd have to lay in certain positions that ultimately weren't comfortable, and sleep was hard. And this is all the same stuff that he was saying, right? And then I had like a cough for like 2 straight weeks that just I was like trying not I had to try really, really hard not to cough because it hurt so much. And then it went away.
Huh.
And she got better before I did. The weirdest thing was though, day two, I started feeling better. I started feeling back to normal. And then all of a sudden later on that night, like I thought it had passed, and all of a sudden I had this radiating chill from like it was like in my lower back, like on both sides, like I'm assuming it was starting in my kidneys, and it would radiate through my whole body. I was like double layered in this like big robe, 2 layers of socks, a beanie on, and I had like a heating pad inside my robe, and like I was still like frigid. I could not get rid of the chills. And
Huh.
she did the same thing. Like it like kind of hit her again, and she was down like the whole next day. She slept. We woke her up because it was time to go back to school. Thank God we didn't send her. Um, and she was just like, I don't feel good. So I was like, cool, you're not going anywhere. Just hang out, take the day and whatever. And I was still feeling kind of crummy. And she slept from like 8:30 till 1. She stayed in her dark room in her bed, which definitely is not her. It's impossible to get her to sleep in from 8 to 1. and she finally got up, and she got a little bit of food and whatever. So it like died out, and then it like came back for like one last punch. It was the weirdest thing, dude.
Huh.
And the same thing happened to me. Like I was down for almost the next day. But my wife, who took care of both of us basically, um, not one thing, not one thing. And she never gets sick anyway, so I have a full belief that it's like her immune system. But it hit Annabelle and I, and so I everything that this guy I was watching, his symptoms, was basically a mirror image of mine almost to the T. And so I'm pretty convinced I had it. My buddy said that him and his wife most definitely had it. And even him, who's been in this since March 13th, being a firefighter, um, I he's a brother in Christ, so I absolutely believe him wholeheartedly. He's like, this is absolute garbage. Like, we need to get people back to work. We need to
Yeah.
start opening this economy back
So
up.
he's saying
Businesses cannot.
So he's basically saying that he doesn't see it as like something to worry about, right?
Not, I mean, we all need to be. Here's the problem: we need to be smart. We need to quit being dumb as a population, as a society, right? Like, I don't. I'm not worried about getting sick. I'm worried about getting other people sick, right? And that includes my wife and my daughter, right? That what kind of a husband and father would I be if I was careless? So that's the only reason why I wear a mask. And you can tell me all day long that masks don't work or they're not that effective, but it's something that I can do not only to protect my family but protect other people. Like, I would feel horrible if I got somebody else sick, knowingly or unknowingly, and if I could have taken some precaution, as much precaution as I could take on my own, I'm not trying to go out and like go to different places. I'm a homebody and I'm living my best life. I was telling Jeff yesterday, I can have Krispy Kreme delivered at 8:30 at night if I want to. Like, I have no business going anywhere. I don't need to, right? But but it's one thing to, you know, not really worry about yourself, but taking the proper precautions. Like, if I'm going to go get something, like I went and bought 2 bales of hay for my archery target yesterday, and I asked every storefront, hey, do you guys require your customers to wear masks? Most of them are like, no, we do, but that's up to you. And so, out of respect for other people, like, I wear a mask when I go out, even if I go out for my run or whatever. I wear a mask. Like,
I
I don't
wouldn't.
want to freak people out.
The masks, I mean, there's studies that you can do on it, obviously, but just the fact that there's a limited supply of masks. All of these people are going to be wearing pretty much probably the same mask day in and day out that are actually doing, you know, coming, falling in line, I guess, with the request.
Hmm.
But the people, especially the older people that don't know how to like take care of the mask, or they're not going to clean it or anything, they're actually going to start causing themselves more problems, health
Yep.
problems,
Hmm.
respiratory issues that they're going to have. They're going to be getting these masks and they're going to be wearing them day in and day out for hours upon end. And there's going to be all this bacteria that builds and builds and builds and builds every single breath that they take out. They're limiting their oxygen supply now at this point, and they're consuming
Yeah.
a lot of carbon dioxide, which I mean, especially old people, they're the people that definitely need like as much oxygen as they can possibly intake. Even some of them
Mhm.
have help with that kind of stuff. So the fact
Yeah.
that they're encouraging old people to go walk around stores and walk around places while covering their ability to intake oxygen properly, I don't know, man. That sounds like a
It's
bad idea.
silliness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
it's
it's
silliness.
really ironic that at Costco, for instance, or at least the Costco by my house, they'll require everyone to wear a mask to go inside. But they said for children under 2, they're not required. But the
See, that's
rhetoric
so
is
ridiculous. Like,
right,
what in the world does that, like, how does that even make sense?
right, and the rhetoric is, oh, children have really weak immune systems, and we need to do them a favor by protecting them. But they're like, well, wear a mask because you need to protect yourself and others. But for 2 years and younger, they don't have to wear a mask. It's like,
Oh my
what?
God.
It doesn't make any sense. It's I Yeah, dude, it's
Well, you know what?
ridiculous. And
Jeff can speak to this part because this is kind of like his wheelhouse, and I know this was not the topic that we were gonna discuss, but we're gonna go through it anyway. Um, being a fitness guy and a CrossFit coach and all the physical stuff that Jeff puts his body through. So when you move around, if you're doing anything active outside of sitting down or laying down, your body's going to require more oxygen, right? Because
Absolutely.
you're exerting energy and your body needs that additional oxygen for your muscles and your lungs and your brain and all that kind of stuff, or else your body starts to have ill effects, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
the
And
fact
just
that, like Chris was
sim-
saying, you limit the oxygen with the mask, like that
right.
doesn't make sense either. And why are you wearing masks
Increase
while
the
you're
carbon
driving your car?
dioxide intake.
Yeah. What was
What
that,
did you
Chris?
say, Chris?
Like, not only do you like take oxygen away, but you're increasing the carbon dioxide.
Right.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing too with masks, right? Or these, at least these homemade masks, and it's they said like, oh, masks won't really keep the bacteria away, or it won't. What did they say? Something about they're making it seem like these masks are like one way valves, right? Meaning, you wear a mask so that it's not necessarily about you contracting or
Yeah.
receiving the bacteria. It's about you preventing your sneezes and cough from spreading. How does that make any sense? Like, it's like putting a plastic bag with a hole in it underwater, saying, "Oh, water won't fill in." It's if something can get in at that microscopic level, it's gonna come out. It's going out also.
Right.
So
Right.
whether you sneeze,
There,
cough, whatever you breathe, it's still gonna go out. I don't
there's a
have any
mainstream
specific
media
scientific data,
clip.
right? But it's just a level of common sense.
Yeah, there's a mainstream media clip from Good Morning America, which they run through this real quick. And there's a doctor that they had bring on the show, and he's like, there's, his basic whole concept was, look, the sick are the ones that need to be considering wearing a mask, and they should not necessarily be wearing it in all cases, but those are the people that should at least be considering it because of that whole conversation that you just had of, yeah, the masks, they help block whatever nasty germs are coming from that sick person, but the air that you breathe in, it's coming from all sides and up and down everywhere from that mask. It doesn't block what's coming back into you.
Right.
So,
It's
and the
Yeah.
there's no it's not a perfect
basically like,
seal.
it's not the healthy that need to wear a mask, it's the sick that need to consider it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's another thing too, just from at least from the fitness industry and just from the perspective of functional basic breathing mechanics. And this is actually something I've come across fairly new. But I mean, this thing is ancient, but it's the proper way to breathe is actually through your nose. The nostrils has such an immense and rich filtration system. It actually helps purify the air before it reaches your lungs compared to being a mouth breather. Other than it sounds gross being a mouth breather, but there's health benefits through with breathing through your nose. And um, and again, in the fitness industry, I started to dabble with nasal only breathing. It's just fascinating how your body responds to uh, just this different breathing mechanics, just nasal breathing, and there's a lot of health benefits actually, and using that, and the reason why we have a nose in general, as far as breathing and filtering the air and oxygen, and before it hits your lungs, compared to just breathing through your mouth. So that's, I think, something to consider as well, especially with times like these.
Yeah. I think most important thing is, none of us are medical professionals. We're not claiming to be,
Mm-mm.
but at the same time, like God gave us a brain, and we know how to use our brain. Sorry, I live on the NASCAR drag strip in front of my house. So, um, I think with what we do know about sickness and health and how germs are transmitted, it's not new, right? And
Mm-mm.
so if we can't rely on that as a foundational like understanding of how viruses work or germs work or bacteria and how we get sick and how we get well and the different things that help promote healthy immunity, like you're going to get sick. We live in broken vessels of a body, right?
Yeah.
So we're susceptible to these types of things. And I unfortunately am a bit of a fatalist, and it can be taken very negative. But if I go, I go. Like I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm not afraid to die at this point in my life. Like it would be a bummer. I couldn't watch my kid grow up, and that breaks my heart. But I like having that faith and hope in where I go afterwards. Like I'm not worried about it, you know. And but at the same time, like I don't think that it's necessarily a bad idea to, I don't want to say pander, but to be just like a cool human being. And like if it makes people nervous being around people who don't have masks, or who are going outside and they're worried about getting sick, and they see me without a mask, if that makes them feel uncomfortable, and literally the only thing that would make them feel comfortable is if I wear a mask, dude, I'll do it. Like it doesn't affect me at all, and
Right.
I wear those face shields, so we have a bunch of them. So we wash them almost on a daily basis, and instead of using those N95 masks and stuff.
Yeah.
And and that's it.
So
So
yeah, the numbers were skewed. You guys see
what
that?
was
You
that?
guys know that? I mean, the whole like fact that they were like counting deaths, like someone died of like lung cancer but had COVID, and they said that they died of COVID.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's apparently hospitals get better funding once if they can inflate the
Yeah.
numbers that way.
So this to me, in my opinion, it was a test run. It was to see how they can control the people. It was a fear mongering whole
Yeah.
flag hoax kind of crap stuff. But see what people can do when you get science. When people say, "Look, this is what the scientists say." Everybody, we are going to die. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Your kids are going to die. Your grandparents are going to die. We are all, and now your cats are going to die. Your dogs are going to die. Everyone's going to die, and everything's going to die. And so the people go, "Oh, so that's what the scientists say. Okay, so what do we do?" And so everyone looks to like people in the government, and then they submit, right, to whatever
Yeah.
the government has to say. They say, "Okay, so now that we're all going to die, what are we going to do about it?" And we need the government, all the guys in the government, the women in the government, to tell us exactly what needs to be done, and we're going to do whatever you say, because you guys have the scientists on your side and you guys have all the answers. But then what happens, like, a month later, and we realize that, oh, they were lying about the numbers. Why would they manipulate the numbers? Is there some motivation behind the lies? Does somebody get money? Does somebody get to kill people because they think the earth is overpopulated? I mean, so, there's like things that happen because someone manipulated data, and because of that manipulation in data, they were able to control the pot, the whole world, basically. I mean, I know
Yeah.
people like protesting and stuff, but 95% of the world, they're all staying home and they're doing exactly what their governments are telling them to do. So when we come to, this is like 30 minutes in, like when we come to talk, like, when we start talking about flat Earth, it's the same concepts. It's the same thing that's happening. They present you with scientists, right? They say, we have spent lots of money and lots of time and hired the smartest, most intelligent people in the world. Therefore, whatever information that we are presenting to you, you have to accept it 100%. And if we want to do something because of that information we're presenting to you, that you have to go along now with whatever we want to do because of this information that we presented to you as a truth. And
Right.
so you get people that go along with it. I mean, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And this is what happened with the whole flat earth globe. It's it
Huh.
it's kind of insane because there's so many facets to it. There's so many questions that come up. There's so many issues that happen because of it. Why would they lie? Why would they do all this stuff? So I think a
That's
good
the foundational question, though. Like, I
yeah.
think that's where we can start is why this big charade? Like, what honestly is this accomplishing by having an entire global population believe in
Yeah.
this global model?
And me, so here's where I start as a Christian. And this is where I try to bring everybody, especially if they're a Christian, this is where I try to start with them. So you say, okay, do you believe in God? Yes. Okay, do
Yes.
you believe in Satan? Yes or no? Okay, do you believe in good and evil? Yes or no? Okay, well, do you believe that there are people on earth that would do bad things, that would want to manipulate your mind to not believe in God? Yes or no? And
Sure.
yeah, sure, I'm sure there's people out there that would totally do that. Okay, well, what would that look like, and what would that feel like, and I just what would that be all about? And if you are okay with that, well, okay, well, first of all, you just you're admitting that yeah, someone could present something to me as a lie to persuade me to believe something that might not be truth. And so when with that in my mind and understanding to begin just life in general, just looking at everything, right? If something is right or if something is wrong, if something is good, if something is evil. So with that in mind, and I'm presented with this globe earth theory. So you have to go back to the scientists, right? Who are these people? What are they saying? Where are they getting their information from? And a lot of the times it just turns out these, I mean, it's like a myriad of different things, right? So it's
See,
like
that's why
I don't even know
social
how to,
media is
it's hard to
horrible
look
to
at
discuss this topic.
thoughts. What?
I said this is why social media is horrible to discuss this topic, because there are so many different components to it and so many different ideas. And
There's
again,
so many levels
being
too.
what's that?
There's so many levels. Like there's
Right.
people within these organizations, right? Like I believe that are like running these organizations that are like the people that are the people trying to dissuade people from believing in God and all that kind of stuff. Here's what I was going to say. I remember what I was like, my whole point was. So when you go to these scientists, you say, okay, so you're telling me that the earth is a spinning round ball, right? Going through this endless universe. Okay, so now we're presented with the very first question that I think everyone needs to ask themselves, and that's where did this all come from? And so that if in that question alone, that's where you start to understand where they are coming from, right? And where all of their theories and ideas stem from. All of their idea, everyone that believes in like the spinning ball earth, if you go to the scientists that give you all of their data, the scientists believe what? Big Bang. That
Right.
this cosmic material was just here, and then this big bang blew up, and then poosh, and then all of a sudden all of this stuff, all of the order, we have trees, we have life, the sun is the perfect distance from the earth to just give it just the right amount of heat, and the moon, and it's all circulating, and all the stars and all this kind of stuff and everything. What it so it all so they're scientists that give you their information. What do they believe? They don't believe in God. They don't believe in creation. They don't believe in all of that. They will tell you and laugh at your face and tell you that that is a fairy tale, that God's word is a fairy tale, that God was never there in the beginning. That's where they come from. And that's their stance, as far as how did this all begin?
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, and you know what I've kind of noticed myself is that lately, and when I say lately, it's a big time frame of like the last several years. It seems that science has become a bigger proponent of the existence of God and his creation, just because of the detail that you can look at. And again, we all have brains. We should all be able to use them logically and take a step back and evaluate everything to the point where if you're looking at creation, right, you're telling me that that life, in order to survive, has to consist of all these specific, um, like finite detailed items, or not items, atoms, molecules, to actually exist. And then to survive, you need the exact amount of X, Y, and Z, like the oxygen in the air, the temperature, all these perfect conditions that are so dialed in. And you're telling me that the one shot that it took, and it all became perfectly survivable and livable,
By
right?
chance.
What's that?
All by chance.
All by chance, exactly. Like
It's,
that's some serious Vegas odds right there,
yeah. Yeah.
Vegas
So,
odds.
yeah. So
right?
if you can start, especially if you can start within a Christian's mind, if you can start with that easy concept, that's a very great foundation. That's a very, very good foundation because they'll agree with you.
Even when it comes down to like what like our for lack of a better term, our foundational like makeup, like the actual molecules that make up our bodies. There are so many of these elements, right, that are found where? Where can we find the elements that our bodies are actually made up of?
Earth,
Um, on Earth.
Yeah, exactly. That
dust.
literally in the soil, in
Yeah.
the actual earth that we step on every day, right? And where did God create us from?
Yeah. The dust.
Actually, absolutely, yeah. And what was interesting is I just read something recently, because translation is fascinating to me when it comes to the Bible, and what words meant back then, why Jesus, or even the apostles when they were writing their gospels, chose to use certain words because it illustrated imagery to the people of that time, something that they would understand, right? And something that would have an impact on them, right? It might not translate, centuries later, but at the same rate, like it was meant for them. So if we're translating it, centuries later, um, dust is actually, I believe it was mud, right?
Mm.
We came from the mud of the earth is what I think the translation actually was. I'll have to verify that, but that's what I read recently,
That's
and I
cool.
was just like, yeah, that's super cool,
It
because you know
includes
what
water.
else? What's that?
It includes the water if it's mud.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
That's
Water.
kind of cool. Yeah.
And you know what else is fascinating is, remember the story, where Jesus helped the blind man see. What did he do? He
Put mud
grabbed
on his
some,
eyes.
Yeah.
right?
He made mud.
Exactly. He made mud. He took some dirt, he spit in it, mixed it up in his hands, and rubbed it in the guy's eyes, and he could see. So it's things like that that are absolutely fascinating
Well, you know
to
what
me.
else
But
I do? That kind of
what's
reminds
that?
me of it. You kind of reminded me when you described that whole aspect of him putting the mud on his eye. But mud also kind of takes the form of clay sometimes and can be
Hmm.
Right.
formed and molded and shaped. And,
Well, I mean, clay comes from the earth. You know
huh?
what I mean? Like you can dig up clay like that. That's what
Yeah.
if you want to talk about like visual proof, you know, our Native American ancestors, they made their houses out of clay that was dug up from the earth. So
Hmm. Yeah, and all the
you know,
jars, pots, and everything.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's things like that are very interesting. And again, like you're saying, if you approach it with a Christian mindset, um, it seems to me that with the more knowledge that we acquire as time goes on, you know, who knows if God really called it science, but I mean, if he created everything, he created all the laws of physics, the laws that we live within reality. And I'm not talking about like law enforcement laws. I'm talking about like the actual laws that we believe hold this whole earth together and how we operate and everything. If he made all that, then he created science. So like the fact that it's proving his existence more and more, at least from my perspective, is fascinating to me. We are the imperfect ones that just get it wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, Chris, before we head in, I know you asked us what our stance was. I'm curious to know where your stance is. Are you like pretty much hands down, full on battle gear, like Earth is flat, or is just kind of like this is the information I've gotten and this is where I'm at?
Yeah,
Or it's like okay,
I
yeah,
already
there
know
could be
the
some
answer to
middle
this one.
ground.
no, I mean, no, I mean, I've made my wife sick by the amount of hours that I've spent just listening to, different people talk and watching different experiments and all that kind of stuff. I am 100% flat earther, 100%
Right
million,
on.
100.
So what was your tipping point? Because I'm just gonna assume here, and I don't know how old you are, but for the most part, I mean, from our I guess you can call quote unquote indoctrination in schools. I
Uh,
mean, we were all taught the same thing where, and we have a global system and and satellites going around the a globe and all that. So what was your tipping point?
oh man, I mean, I didn't really. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't really care too much in high school, but I was really not a high school person. I didn't like the whole education stuff. So
Okay, fair enough.
whenever I was presented with that kind of stuff, I didn't. I just wasn't paying attention. I was probably looking at a girl and write another
Of
song.
course.
Yeah. But I do remember being in school and stepping up and saying stuff about when evolution would be brought up in class and stuff. I remember like calling that out, but um, I
Wow,
don't know.
even at a young age, huh?
Yeah, I think, but I don't think my awakenings came up as far as like because I'm a 9/11 truther. Um, I did
Like you don't.
ton.
What do you mean? Like it wasn't an inside job. There was no detonation.
Yeah,
Is that what you meant?
thermite brought down the twin towers and most
Yeah.
likely Building 7 as well. There were most likely no airplanes. Most of it probably just like rockets or
Okay.
just guided missiles or something like that. If you look into Flight 93, there was a whole movie about it, which I went and saw.
Yeah.
And
No, I saw it too, and I'm pretty skeptical about what media is saying about 9/11 as well.
Dude,
Flight
honestly,
93,
all you have to do, guys, just watch the one video that they have of the quote unquote plane that hit the Pentagon. Come
yeah,
Oh
on,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
come
I saw
on.
that.
There's
Yeah.
no way that's a freaking
Or,
plane.
or another one would be a nail in the coffin. Also, would be Flight 93. If you do just a quick study on that, there's no. Flight 93 was the one that they supposedly, they fought the pilots and took the plane down, so it didn't reach its destination. So it just crashed in the middle of like Ohio
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah,
Pennsylvania, I
yeah, yeah,
thought,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So just if you just go and like look at the news videos and all that kind of stuff, there's no plane, there's no luggage, there's no engine, there's not
Yeah.
even
There's
really
no bodies.
there's no bodies, there's nothing is there. And it's crazy that no one talks I mean, people talk about it, but if you talk about it, you just no one really cares. Like so it's like I don't know. It blows my mind. Like how do you not ask questions and say, you want me to believe that a big huge airplane commercial airliner crashed into this open land and it disintegrated everything and everybody? No way, dude. Like
Look, guys, I watched the show Lost twice all the way through. I should know. I'm an expert. There would be wreckage. There would be people, pulling like
There'd be
supplies out of.
body parts, man.
Yeah, dude. Like, come on, man. I've seen Lost. I know
hey,
what's up.
do you know what was that one? What the old guy's name that was like pretty cool and he was like like really with it and like super like
John Locke.
John
Yeah,
Locke.
John
Do you know where
Locke.
he was from? Do you know where he
Yeah,
worked?
a box cutter from Tustin. Exactly. Tustin up, son. That's
Oh,
what I'm
what?
talking about.
Dude,
Yeah. Dude, my father, listen, my father-in-law got into that show like way after it aired, and he got Maggie and I into it. And he teases me because he's like, "Oh yeah, John Locke from Box Cutter from Tustin." I'm like, so yeah, no, I know all about John Locke. And
Well,
another thing, that show is the worst show ever. Like I know I said I watched it twice, but I was hoping that I missed something. But the writers literally need to be tarred and feathered because they really just they stopped caring. That was they were like, whatever, just write whatever you want. Like
Like we
just
can tell
I
them
think
whatever. Yeah. Oh man,
yeah, like that made no sense. But anyway, that's a whole nother story for another
that's
day.
funny.
Oh
So
man.
so the next one of the next steps that I go to, when talking to somebody, I mean, because there's so much to talk about, right? So what's easy to plant the seeds, Flat Earth 101. Don't get like too in depth and stuff like that. Just plant seeds here and there, and let them germinate.
Mhm.
Um, so if you look at the two choices that are presented to you, you have a spinning ball Earth that they want you to believe is spinning at like 1,000 miles per hour. That there's water that sticks to the side of the ball because the mass that the water is on is so big that it pulls the water towards the mass. Not only is the ball of water spinning itself at 1,000 miles per hour, but it's hurtling through space along with other planets, and it's going around this big, huge planet called the sun, and it's spinning around the sun at 11,000 miles per hour. That's what they want you to believe about this spinning ball. Or you're presented with I believe we live on a flat plane that has rugged aspects about it, mountains and hills and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's flat. It's a flat plane. Um, my belief and studies have led me to believe that there is an enclosure, and that's how we have pressure. That's how we have pressure in this atmosphere. That's how we have atmospheric pressure because you can't have an atmospheric pressure without an enclosure, without something enclosing that pressure in. If you just have an box or container, you're never going to have pressure within that box. It's just never going to happen. And I believe that this flat plane that is enclosed is surrounded by a big, huge ice wall that keeps all of the water in. And in my opinion, I mean, I haven't done too much study on it, but from the things I've read and everything, I just believe that this ice wall is very, 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 very long. And so the reason why people are like, oh, how come no one's ever tracked it and stuff like that? I just feel like it's probably too far, like to whatever barriers on the other side of that ice wall, and it's just humanly not possible to like make it all the way there and back because there's no resources available. So when I'm presented with those two, I mean, and you present those two to somebody and you say, "Tell me which one, first of all, goes along with your everyday reasoning." So stand outside and look up at the sky. Does it tell you that you're spinning at 1,000 miles per hour and spinning around some other object at 11,000 miles per hour? Or does just your common everyday sense just look up and see the trees, not, if there's no wind that day, everything's still? Does it tell you that the earth is still and not moving? And to me, that yes, when I stand outside and you just use your everyday, just simple common sense, just right off the bat, you say, yeah, well, observation, scientific experiment. Yeah, I would notate that we are not moving and we are stable because the leaves are not moving, nothing's moving. I'm stabilized, the ground's stable. I look up at the sky, everything, So
Well,
those.
So I have a question.
go for it,
Mhm,
Jeff.
So I'm assuming you've been on a plane, right, Chris?
mhm.
So let's say you're on a plane. We're at what 20,000? No, not 20. Maybe 15,000 feet from the ground, and you're going 400 or 500 miles an hour. When you look out the window, it doesn't feel like you're going that fast. I guess it's just that perspective, right? The further you are away from, let's say, a point of reference, like if you're, let's say, even just in a car and you're getting motion sickness because everything in close proximity to you is moving quick, they tell you to look out the window, look out towards the horizon or distance. It kind of slows. Uh, it kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but your
No, I
perception
get
of
it.
speed is
My
drastically
my one
explode,
thing
right?
with that, yeah, my one thing with that whole like quote unquote experiment kind of like test or
Uh huh.
whatever is you're putting yourself in an isolated box.
Okay. So
So
you're in an enclosure. It's not you're not like wide open. Is what you're
yeah.
saying.
So if there was an opening like on the top of that airplane, I'm sure things would probably be a little bit different as far as what you felt and observed and
Yeah.
you know.
Oh well, at that point you'd be feeling the
It
wind
become
for
almost the
sure.
beginning of Lost at that point.
I'm
Well, let
sorry.
me ask you this. Oh, sorry, Chris. Go answer Jeff's question.
I just said it would become almost the beginning of Lost at that point.
Nice, nice. Oh my goodness. Well, look, here's my question. So, kind of back to what you were saying about the at what speeds we're spinning on our own axis, and then what speed we're spinning around the sun. So, my question is this. So, when I think about spinning at a high rate of speed, I think about that stupid ride that I was dumb enough to go on called the
Oh God.
Gravitron at Tustin
Oh,
Tiller days,
I
right?
feel
Way back in
sick
the day.
already, dude.
Like, oh my God, that was the worst decision ever. And I couldn't move for the life of me. I mean, I could be planted, right? But if we're in this enclosure that's spinning at that rate, how am I able to move around and walk out my front door and get up from my chair? Because really, the only thing that I see people doing on that ride is either getting sick or they're plastered against the pad on the wall that they're sitting on or
Yeah,
standing
if
against.
their spinning ball was and gravity was as they say it was, well, how are we moving so freely?
Yeah, and that's kind of I guess my biggest question, like how are we able to move freely
Yeah,
as we do
and then
in
and then if
cars and
they
everything?
yeah, and then if they say that oh you can move about like on that while spinning that fast, I mean that doesn't.
Yeah, that doesn't jive too well. And it's simple experiment. Take a top, try to put something on top of the top and spin it. What happens? It flies right off. So that definitely can, I guess confirm the existence of the enclosure theory, right? The idea of an enclosure,
Well,
so that
yeah,
keeps everything in,
yeah,
but like we wouldn't be able to move at that speed. At least that's what it seems like to
yeah,
me.
and here's the two concepts, right? One is that you're hurtling through this. They say it's an endless space, that there's no end to this space, apparently, right?
Hmm.
Like they laugh that they say,
Never
"Oh,
know.
where's the end of Earth?" But then when you say, "Well, where's the end of your space?" and they say it's infinite space, and but when you say, "Okay, well, it's an infinite Earth," I mean, how does the concept of an infinite Earth not make any sense? Yet a concept of an infinite space makes sense. So I don't
Yeah,
like
Huh.
when they try to
Interesting.
put you down like, well, where's the edge of Earth? You're like, well, where's the edge of space? And then they laugh at you for asking that question, but it seems like they're not understanding their own, where they're coming at with that at least. So
Huh.
you have these two concepts, right? So one of them is you're hurtling through this endless space, and and God is nowhere, right? Like, where's
hmm
God? Where's God in the endless space? Where is he?
coffee break.
Yeah, right. So they want
Coffee break.
so in the minds of the people that are studying whatever the scientists are trying to indoctrinate the kids with or you with or whatever, they want to put in your heads that we are this little not and have you seen the size of our Earth compared to what they tell us the size of all the other planets are, especially like the sun? So
Uh,
if you put their Earth next to their sun, the Earth is like a dot, like next to like
Right.
a grapefruit. And so they everything that they tell you, everything that they say, Earth is small. Earth is the smallest planet. There's bigger planets out there. There's more things. There's more. There's this. There and we're hurtling through this endless space, and there's just massive amounts of things just we can just explore for the rest of eternity, and we can just see what's out there. And not only is there just this big, huge, the most amazing, just enormous universe that your mind can't even grasp, but you are a little tiny, tiny, tiny little speck in this whole universe. And so how does that make you feel as just someone living life? It just makes you feel insignificant. Like, yeah, where is God in all of this? I mean, even if you are a Christian and you believe in space and you say, well, God is beyond space, right? Because I'm guessing that's what the answer would be for Christians that believe in space. Like,
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
God's beyond
because if God's in heaven
space.
and we can get to space in a rocket ship, then clearly that God's not in space, so he's got to be like outside of that or above that or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know
So
what's
so
also
the science.
interesting that just occurred to me is the idea, like if you read anything in the Bible about the sky, right? There it confirms a two bright lights, one greater than the other, sun and the moon, obviously, right? And the stars. It never, at least to my knowledge, I could be wrong. Somebody can, if
100%. I know
people
where
are
you're
allowing
going.
comments, yeah, it doesn't mention any planets ever.
100%. Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's something that just occurred to me. You know, um, so I find
Okay.
that kind
So
of
yeah,
interesting.
keep going with yeah. So that whole line of thinking of you're not only is the Earth a little tiny speck, but you're a tiny speck on this Earth. So you are very, 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 very insignificant in the universe, right? And
Hmm.
so, as a person, I could understand, like, oh, yeah, where is God? Especially if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God. You're like, see, like, yeah, you thought God created this earth. Like, where is he? Like, we've been searching all over the universe and we can't find him yet. And we've searched everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, or you take it to now you are presented and you look at the flat earth whole philosophy, right? And at least as far as my philosophy is concerned. So my philosophy is that we are an enclosed ecosystem that God created for us, atmospheric pressure, the water that we need, the land, everything is this beautiful encapsulated, basically, like we can't get out and we can't get in unless God allows us to, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
And to me, if you read, like, I believe it's in Revelation and stuff, when it talks about the throne of God, when it talks about the earth, and this is the Holy Spirit talking to us, it describes earth as what? It describes it as the footstool of God's throne. So if that's the picture that you have, it's a footstool, right? And when you think of a footstool, what do you think? You think of pillars, which God said he established the foundations of the earth on. And you think of something that's not movable, stationary. And what else is it? It's near and dear and close to the creator who's looking down on his creation at all times, at all points. And that just, to me, with that thought in mind, knowing that God is right beyond the stars, looking down on us, and we are his footstool that sits before him. I mean, can you guys imagine? Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy,
How
dude.
much love and care God has for us, and how much he is in control and cares. And that's my philosophy on that aspect of flat earth, is that the concept of a loving creator who created this beautiful earth for us to live on and is watching over us every second. It just brings me that much closer to God.
Well,
And
absolutely. Like when we recognize our own humanity and how fragile we are, yet we survive, and the things that God allows us to experience to help stretch and grow us and teach us through trials and tribulations and stuff and all the garbage that we have to end up going through on a personal level. Like it really kind of puts everything in perspective, if you can think about it like that and not get all Debbie Downer, like poor me, like I can't believe this is happening to me, all that kind of stuff. If you can understand it with a different perspective of like there's something that's going to come out of this one way or another,
yeah,
and that level of thought and carefulness that he takes to make sure that he walks us through. Because ultimately, like I think that as a society, even a global population, we have this main idea of our own mortality, that death death is a scary thing because it's so uncertain, unknown, painful, on one level or another, but not understanding what's on the other side of death. Like, it could be good or bad, just like it's black and white. There's one of two places that we end up, which we all believe.
Mhm.
But if you don't have that kind of perspective, um, I mean, I can totally see how you can believe anything else, and I can totally see why we have the issues that we have today. With like big mental health issues. Like anxiety and stuff like that. And like I used to have really bad anxiety attacks like all the time before I became a believer, and even a few after that.
Mhm.
But the cool thing is I firmly believe, like, I'm not gonna say that it was completely audible, but like there's moments where you have to recognize that a thought is not your own. If you know yourself at all, which I don't think we do know ourselves, man doesn't even know the darkness, in his own
Yeah.
heart, that we're capable of. No matter how much of a good person you are, you're still capable of like some pretty dark, twisted stuff, right? Um, but I can't take credit. I can't call that this my idea, because my brain would have never have arrived at this unless it would have had assistance, right? So my with my anxiety and stuff, I know this is going to be a little bit of a rabbit trail, but like it ended up like lots of things were contributing to it. I was partying, I was fooling around with girls and stuff. I was really heavy into pot and all this garbage. And what ended up happening was God slowly started taking each of these things away from me. And pot would intensify my anxiety attacks, drinking would intensify my anxiety attacks, and so all I was left with was the opposite sex. And so I couldn't even do that, because it would get to the point where I would get so nervous with any level of intimacy that I would throw up. Like, that's how bad. And I would have a full-blown anxiety attack where, like, when it finally end, like hours later, I would be exhausted mentally and physically, like just spent, right? And so I couldn't even do that anymore. Like, so all of these vices, right? God took them away in one way or another, whether it was, uh, my commitment to staying away from that or not, right? Giving me the gift of quitting cold turkey and not have to do with withdrawals or, urges and stuff like that, right? So the interesting thing is years later, probably like 2 or 3 years later, after I had knocked all that business off, I'm pretty sure it was after I got married. um, this thought came to me, and it was not my voice in my own head, but what was said was, um, by the way, the reason why I let you hold on to your anxiety for so long was I was protecting you from other people,
Mm.
right? Because I could have gotten a disease. I could have,
Oh,
I
yeah.
could have gotten, I could have gotten somebody pregnant, and then having a child at that point in my life might have been really super rough,
Oh, right
and
on.
really horrible timing. Like, I was damaging my own heart and my own mind by continuing with those things, right? And it broke down to one thing. My main trigger, I think, is the point here. It was intimacy with the opposite sex, and so that was a really profound thought. I was like, whoa, because that worked. That kept me away, from doing that kind of stuff. So I thought that was really cool. And then, like, months and months later, it was like, oh, and by the way, the other reason why I let you hold on to that for so long was because I was protecting other people from you. And at that point, like, I had to come to the realization that I wasn't only the victim, I was also the monster, right? Because I could have given somebody a disease. I could have ruined somebody else's life by getting them pregnant. I was taking something that didn't
Hmm.
belong to me from somebody else. You know, I was tarnishing something that you know, that he would have been setting aside for some other guy, and I took that
Yeah.
away from that person. I could
Yeah.
have, I can't even, I don't even know the extent of the damage on a physiological, emotional level that I had on other people, and so that rocked my world, dude. Like that, those two thoughts that were basically on opposite ends of the spectrum, and I was both. Like it, like that knocked me on my butt for sure.
Huh.
But
Nice.
yeah, I totally lost what my point was on that
I
show.
like
Jeff, you gotta reel me in, bro. Like if we're gonna be doing this, you gotta reel me in, dude.
Well, you brought up the good point that kind of leads me to my next point is, just simple observation, right? So we go back to the whole spinning ball Earth. And so we have the spinning ball Earth and we have the flat stationary Earth. The spinning ball Earth says that I I'm supposing that all the stars move as well. So everything's shooting through this like universe, and I don't know. But if you do like, I don't know what their like theory is as far as like the constellations, as far as spinning ball Earth. But so the thing is that since the beginning of time, I mean, it goes back to like sailors, and I'm sure other people that are just traversing the land, Native Americans or settlers or anything before they had compasses. People use and still use today. They use the stars for what?
Navigation.
For
Navigation, yeah,
navigation,
correct.
for telling them where to go. And so how how is that possible? How can you use stars for navigation? How is that possible? How would
They
that be
would have to be in
possible?
the same place.
They
They'd
would
have to be
have to be, yeah,
stationary.
they would have to be in the exact same locations every single time you looked up at them to, they if they were in different locations every single time, or they were different stars or different constellations, you would not be able to navigate using the stars because they would constantly be changing. But ever since the beginning of time, we have seen and used the same exact constellations and stars, the same exact ones. So, given the spinning ball theory, where you're hurtling through space at 11,000 miles an hour, you would automatically, I don't even know what their theory is, but just in my mind, you would be seeing different stars and constellations. Just if you look at the heliocentric, which is a universe that, like a Earth universe that centers around the sun, everything goes around the sun. That's heliocentric, meaning the
Mhm.
sun's the center of that. Um, if that's the case, you can look at a model and you can say, okay, let's just say that this constellation's over here and this constellation's over here and this constellation's over here. It's impossible for it to line up like that every single night, right? If you're hurtling through an endless space that's constantly changing, that's constantly moving, you're going to be seeing different stars. It's just the fact of the matter. So my flat earth theory goes along with scripture. So to me, it's beautiful. It's amazing. It's sovereign. It's just God awe-inspiring when I think about it nowadays. After I have this flat Earth theory, so the stars to me, I think of it as like a baby mobile or mobile, however you say it.
Mhm.
On a crib, and you wind it up, and it just like spins around, and it just keeps spinning
Uh-huh.
around in the same spot, and the baby just looks up at it, and it just keeps spinning around and around and around. Same concept. So, I mean, I don't have a theory as far as if the stars are actually in the firmament, like if the firmament's like a thick, solid substance. I don't know too much about that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But what my belief is, and what my research has taught me to come to the conclusion of, is that the stars are up there, solidified somehow in their position, and that whole thing is moving like a baby mobile above us, right? And it's just a constant slow turning movement, and you can actually see the star patterns if you do a star time lapse. If you like go on
Uh-huh.
like or something like that, and you can see perfect circles of these stars, of these constellations.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so another thing is, so when it says, that, oh yeah, they use the constellations for navigation, right? So what else do they use the stars for? Do you guys know? What do they use the stars and the moon for? Like back in the day?
Astrology stuff.
Like to tell what?
The future.
No, more of like to tell like the seasons, right? Like when the
Oh,
seasons
okay,
are,
gotcha.
so they can
Right.
look up and they can say, oh, this constellation is in this part of the sky right now. And so I know that it's summertime. And it almost looks like a swastika, like when you end up doing it. But if you take the Big Dipper and you put it into its four seasons, the
Oh
way
yeah, I see it.
the way that it's shaped, it makes a swastika, right? Because it lets you know that it's in this area of the sky in summer, it's here in fall, here in winter, here in spring.
Hmm.
Dot, 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 every single year. Dot, 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 every single year.
So what
They
you're
have
saying is that we're stationary, but the
the lights above us
whatever
are
are
moving.
moving. Got it. Okay.
And we go to God's word. So what does God say about it? Right? We have to go to God and say, so Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. So another simple concept about flat earth is that you can see God's creation and his wonderful attributes by giving us the ability to navigate, by the ability to understand the seasons and the times, all by these beautiful stars that light up our night sky. To me that makes more sense, something that's in a pattern, that's logical, that it makes more sense to me to say, well, I suppose a creator did that, rather than to say, well, I suppose it just kind of happened by accident, right?
Right.
Hmm.
So
You know,
once
it's
again,
interesting too that so God controls everything, right? If you're anything like me, growing up, when we're being told this in church and stuff like that, God's creator of everything. He's the one. He has everything operating. He knows all. He sees all, and it's just like that's kind of a big undertaking, right? So if you know, like if we compare that to like our ability to even control our involuntary bodily functions, like breathing, heartbeat, like things like that we don't control, right? They're happening. How is that? Like, oh well, your brain's telling it that or whatever, right? So that just kind of reinforces my idea of divine creation, right? Something else, something I was created to operate this way, and my body is automated, right? God is the master of automation. Like, if we want to take our cues in business from anyone about automating different parts and facets of our business to be more efficient, we should be looking at God, because, eh, I think I had always had this idea that He was manually doing all of this, and I don't think that's giving God enough credit to say, well, like, I'm not stupid. Like, why would I be doing that? When I could implement something or create something that would work automatically for itself. Like the laws of science that we know to be true, how physics works and stuff like that. How the seasons change constantly. Like, it's just automated, right? There's so many things that I recognize as being automated processes that he's created that work on their own, so to speak. And he just manages everything, right? Instead of actually physically spinning the globe, spinning the world, or spinning the stars above us, or whatever, right? Whatever we
mhm.
believe. That he's created automated processes for these things instead of just manually doing them.
Yeah, and
So
if you do a study on like the sun and the moon, it's pretty cool. It's people ask like, well, how big is your sun and big is your moon on like a flat Earth? And I say, well, I don't think it's. I think it's way, 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 way smaller than what the mainstream scientists say. In my opinion, the sun is very small, and the moon as well. I don't think they're like big at all. If you and I think that's most flat earthers believe that there's smaller light sources that are within this whole like firmament dome kind of thing that God created for us, and they rotate above us on like a 24. I think the moon is a little bit slower. I think it does like a 28 day, 24 hour rotation or something like
Uh-huh.
that. Um, but yeah, if you that so you know that so that's the flat Earth is like theory on the sun and the moon. It's smaller. They're localized. They're within the firmament or the dome or whatever, and they're basically on a circuit above the Earth, and they just keep on that circuit that God put them on.
Huh. So you're saying you think space is definitely finite, right?
I think space is like a fairy tale, and I think it's just all been propagated through Disney movies. Disney owns like so much of the whole movie industry,
Oh yeah,
anyways.
it's
Um,
no, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Paramount, so many people went on board. It's funny because they had like, like I mean, they have like I think it's Paramount. Back in the day, if you watch a Paramount like from I don't know before they went to space, before they claimed to have like photos of Earth and stuff like that. Paramount has like before their movies, they always have like a globe whatever Earth spinning that says like Paramount or
Uh huh.
something like that, Paramount Pictures or something. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
they had a picture and a model of like this globe Earth like before they even had like before anyone had like claimed of having pictures of like the Earth, and it's like
Huh.
all right.
Oh, that's something new. I've never heard that before. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I
Yeah.
gotta look that up.
So here's my question to people that, when I get to this point, I say, okay, so, you have all these questions about why I believe flat Earth, right? And why I don't believe like the spinning ball Earth. Well, my question to somebody that believes in like the spinning ball Earth theory is why do you believe that it's a spinning ball? And what evidence did you weigh out to make that decision?
Hmm.
I mean, so I mean, do you believe in the like you Jeff? You kind of believe in the spinning ball theory, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's, yeah,
I
it's
think
kind of what's
we're
been
just
indoctrinated.
indoctrinated. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm on my iPad at the same time. I know I've been a little bit quiet and whatever, and just kind of like nodding my head, but I'm listening and actually doing some flat Earth uh, research online, and yeah, it's interesting. To me right now, at least for shock value, I guess the best way I could describe it is both sides. Well, for me, right through indoctrination, the global description made makes sense. But then it's how you're describing it, and getting the imagery like the footstool of God and the four pillars and looking down upon us and let there be light,
Mhm.
and let these lights be the source of how you can tell time, day, seasons, and whatnot. I'm it, and that's also starting to make sense, and it's just kind of like, I guess, to kind of give it a personal experience. Like I've just been recently getting into like woodworking or just kind of working with my hands, and when you're working on something on a project, like you're working on a flat surface, right? So as a creator, that makes sense. But at the same time too, it's just kind of this image of God and being a creator. Also, I think it's also nice to believe that he has this ability to create something so infinite, so massive, uh beyond any like human understanding. Like I just feel like certain things humans will always try to strive to understand, like how do you prove God, right? And there's then you have these nerds of people, I guess you could say, like trying to find every reason how to prove or disprove God. But I just feel like it's just one of those things where God just exists, and I'm just not gonna try to prove or disprove. It's an inward exploration versus an outward type of thing.
Well,
If that makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. With respect to that, I think what happens is there's two groups of people that we can fall into that can fall into these categories, right? There's the people that aren't out to find God; they're just trying to find things to disprove God. And then
Right.
there's the ones that are actually looking for God, that actually find Him, and dedicate their life to following Christ, right? And so, if you take a look at, you have scientists, they'll do everything they can to come up with theories that disprove the existence of God, yet not everything is so 100% concrete with what they think. We've been believing the Big Bang Theory, but still to this day, it's not 100%, right? It's their
Yeah.
best guess. And that's just been the best guess for however many years, since Darwin came up with the idea, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so the other thing is if you look at somebody like Lee Strobel, right? The Case series that he has, Case for Christ, Case for God, like those movies really put into perspective for me somebody who was honestly looking for the truth, and him being a staunch atheist, right, for all of his life, and through the Holy Spirit that was living within his wife, because she was a believer, like slowly whittled away at his pride and his arrogance about what he knew, and then his God-given talents of being a good reporter and a good investigator, went out and honestly sought Christ and said, "Look, if you're real, I need to know." And then what happened? Lee Strobel is like one of the great Christian authors of our day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, so the two categories are, if you're honestly looking, or if you're just looking to satisfy your own disbelief and or not wanting to believe. You're
Right.
gonna be able to find anything to suit your own agenda or your own platform.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of people like to get their ears tickled. I mean, Christ even like God tells us this, that
Hmm.
there's going to be a time when they just want to hear whatever, scratches that itch in their ear that they want to hear, whether it's, I can sleep with whoever I want, I can just, live however I want,
I can get
or,
free healthcare and free education.
or yeah.
I don't have to go back to
Did I,
work. I'm just gonna
did I just
rely
say that
on
out
stimulus
loud?
checks.
Sorry,
or,
I probably should have said that.
or if it's just, someone basically simply telling them fairy tales that make them feel excited about living. If you ask people why they believe in the spinning ball Earth, I think a majority of people would probably say because scientists have figured it out, and they already have figured all this out for us and told us. They might say because NASA has sent people to the moon and they collected moon rocks and they took pictures and they showed us the pictures of Earth.
Oh, you mean that film that Oliver Stone did?
Oliver Stone.
What, wasn't he the one that supposedly filmed the moon landing in
Oh,
a lot?
Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Oliver Stone. I do think you're a brilliant director, writer.
Have you
My bad.
guys ever seen Capricorn 1?
Uh-uh.
It's it's
No.
it's it's basically, so it has O.J. Simpson in it. It's from like 1970.
What?
Just destroyed all credibility right there, Chris. Great job, buddy.
It's actually a really good movie, actually.
I'll have to check that out. Where do you know if it's on any streaming service?
Yeah, it's on Prime.
Oh, cool. All right.
Super good movie, dude. So it basically, instead of the moon landing, they're doing the Mars landing. And what all happens is the NASA or the space program that's doing this Mars landing or whatever, they basically have to get to Mars because they want to be the best nation in the world and they have to make them look good and stuff like that. Something happens, and so they end up not being able to go to Mars, and so they have to fake it and lie to all the public. it's pretty much exactly what they did to begin with, like the moon landing, but they're just saying it's Mars.
Huh.
And
So,
basically, the whole premise is
Chris, how
basically.
much does? I'm sorry,
Huh?
Chris. Go ahead.
Well, the premise is basically like the astronauts don't want to be in it. They don't want to lie to the public, and so they try to escape. And the freaking like space agency and stuff like that, they're like hunting them down. Like the
Oh my God,
movie.
I want to see this movie now. You said Capricorn One.
Yeah, it's a must watch.
I'm
It's on
so
Netflix,
putting
you
that
said,
in.
or Amazon
And
No,
Prime.
just
Prime.
hey, if you do watch it, wait till you see the very last scene. It's 70s out, like you wouldn't believe. It's almost a joke. So you'll understand if you watch it. You'll start cracking up, dude. So funny. Oh my
You
goodness.
know, while we're on the topic of movies, so we just introduced The Princess Bride to Annabelle, my daughter, who's 6, just this like weekend or whatever. And so now she's like watching it nonstop. I've seen The Princess Bride more times in the last 48 hours than I have in my entire life. And so there's this one part where what's his first name? Is it Carrie Ellis?
Carrie.
It's Elwes, and I never know how to pronounce his name.
Oh, Ellis.
Ellis, yeah, that guy, right? So the guy from Saw that cuts off his foot, that guy. So
Okay.
he says something. He's wearing a mask in the beginning of the movie when he's reintroduced, right, as this masked pirate guy, and there's this one line where he's like fighting Andre the Giant, right? In this scene, like when he first comes into contact with him, and he's like on his back, and the Andre the Giant goes, "Well, why are you wearing a mask?" And he's like, "Oh, because it's comfortable," and said something else. And he's like, "I have a feeling in the future it's really going to catch on. Everybody's going to be wearing a mask." And like my wife's like, "Dude, you gotta like hear this scene. Like, come here." And like I stood there for like 10 minutes. I'm like, "Dude, I just want to go shoot my bow and arrow. Like, what's gonna happen?" She's like, "Just watch, listen." And so she pointed that out. I was like, well, wow, that's kind of funny. So, but that was my pandemic story.
That was a sick bow.
Oh man.
What's that?
That was a really sick bow you got.
Dude, I am like obsessively addicted right now. Like it's a bear approach, and I got it off of Amazon. It was like 300. It was like $400. And
Nice.
yeah, it was a pretty penny. I saved up for it. It was a birthday present to myself, and yeah, dude.
When's your birthday?
The 21st.
Oh, dude, happy birthday.
You already said happy birthday. You texted me.
Oh yeah, I did. I did text you. I did.
Yeah.
I do remember now.
That. Yeah, and I appreciated that. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so I got that, and like I've been really like itching to get into archery because I really, really, really want to go on an elk hunt, and like I constantly am listening to the great and powerful Joe Rogan and his podcast. And that's like a big majority of what they talk about constantly. Like he's had Ted Nugent, he's had John Dudley, he's had Cameron Haynes, like all these like great bow hunters. And like just the way they talked about it was so like, it was just fascinating. And I was like, I'm a big carnivore. So the way that they were talking about when they cook the elk meat and everything, I was just like, dude, I have to go do this. And so I finally, after months and months and months of gathering funds, I finally was able to do it.
Nice.
Yeah. But there was one question that I did have, Chris. And this is kind of like one that's probably common from the other side of the spectrum from you is how like if we're on this flat plane, how does, based on what we know and what we've been indoctrinated with, so to speak, how does the eclipse work, like with the moon?
Yeah, I was just looking at that right now.
I haven't researched too much on that. I don't really care too much. I did see so you can't see the eclipse anywhere on the Earth, right? You can only see the eclipse if you're on a certain part of the Earth at a certain given time. It's not like everyone in the whole world gets to see the eclipse, right? When there's going to be an eclipse happening. So if you want to, you can do some like sort of study on that circuit, right? That I was talking about. How there was a guy that I mean, even our own brains tell us that the sun's on a 24-hour circuit. Like you
Mhm.
can you like expect it at the same time. And if you're thinking like, oh well, aren't there like more days with more light and less light? Yeah, because on this circuit, it's not necessarily like a circuit that stays on necessarily the same path. It could take a little bit of a different circular paths, sort of say, whether it's a smaller circle or a larger circle. That way, because light only travels so far. So if you have a smaller light source and it is moving relatively, above on a slightly different, path, it is going to light different parts of the earth for different amounts of time at different times of the year. But all in
Mhm.
all, it's still on its 24-hour path because we still have that 24-hour cycle of a day. The moon, however, according to this guy's whatever theory, the moon rotates on a slower path, and therefore, certain times on this certain circuit, if you're standing in a certain part of the Earth, yeah, they're gonna like cross in front of each other eventually, but only appear to be crossing um, to the people that are within that certain area on the Earth that you can actually they actually line up. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
so if you do it, yeah. So if you look at like, because I wanted to watch time, I wanted because everyone in the United States like, there's gonna be an eclipse, there's gonna be an eclipse, there's gonna be an eclipse. So I went to go check out where you could see the eclipse, thinking that you could just see it anywhere on Earth at any time, but you can't. It went through like Washington, Idaho, Kansas, Nebraska, like toward all the way like diagonally like through the United
Uh-huh.
States, and
Mhm.
only those people within that diagonal could see it. So what does that tell you? I mean, it tells me that if the sun and the moon were as far and as big as they're telling us that they are, wouldn't everyone see it at the same time?
I mean, I would think so. Yeah. And
Yeah.
something what you were just saying about different circular paths, orbits or whatever you want to call them. Um, you look at a molecule, right, or an atom, and the drawing of what an atom supposedly looks like has a nucleus in the center, right?
Mhm.
And then they have all these other particles that are surrounding them in these different orbits, right? If you look at any kind of a just a mock drawing of an atom,
Yeah.
um, they have an orbit. They have things that are orbiting around a center, whether it's a circle or whatever, right? That's what it is, and that kind of, I mean, you can kind of overlay that imagery if you want. I don't know how far of a stretch that might be, but you can kind of overlay that same concept of how these neutrons, electrons, and protons are orbiting the nucleus of an atom, um, to the concept that you're actually saying, like whether the center is flat, a rectangle, or a flat circle or whatever, or a globe. By what you're saying is that there are, the sun and the moon and the stars are in their own orbits above the flat plane. They don't circle
Here's how
around it.
Here's how I can kind of describe it, like for a visual like thing. So imagine like a kid is standing in the middle of a hula hoop, like a big, huge hula hoop, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
10-yard hula hoop, and he's standing in the very middle of it. He has like a string, and he has this something that is like a ball, and it's on the end of his string. The kid starts
Mm-hmm.
spinning around, and this is like the orbit of the. This is like the circuit of the sun moving directly above the flat Earth, right? So this kid's moving, spinning this sun around, and it's going in 24 hours. Every time it spins around, it's 24 hours. Well, let's say it's going to be wintertime. He can either pull in some of the string or he can give a little bit more string. The sun's still moving in a 24-hour whatever thing because he's still moving as fast as as he is. He's not moving any slower. He's still moving faster. So whether the sun has to pick up speed because it's on a longer circuit or it's on a shorter circuit, so it has like less speed because it's closer to the guy.
Mhm.
That's kind of my, so because sometimes in the sun, I don't know what it is. Once again, I'm not like I haven't researched all of it, but the concept is like sometimes the sun could be over this area because there's quote unquote more string that is laxed, or sometimes it's pulled a little bit more towards the center, giving more light on the land down below it for longer periods of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get that
I can
absolutely.
see it.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain it like that, but
No, that makes total sense. My next question though is, how much do you think NASA actually hates you?
you know what's interesting is that I actually there's a very intelligent, beautiful woman that goes to my church. She has 4 kids, and her husband's just amazing. And she worked for NASA on the Mars stuff.
Really?
Yeah, but I've never brought it up to her. I don't want to take my fight. I don't want it to take it as a. I don't want it. I don't want to take it as a fight. I'm just trying to open up dialogue because I don't feel people have been presented with multiple sides to actually consider, and they're not even considering the other side. And I don't know. I I don't know. I just never brought it up to her, but I know NASA probably hates me. I did write a song called "NASA: The Great Deception." You
I
guys can
was
all.
just gonna get in. That's why I asked, because I want you to talk about your project, because I mean, ever since I've known that you're a musician, I've always highly respected that and think you're a great musician. But I definitely wanted to kind of give some attention to that, because I do know that you've been working on the Great Deception project for a little bit, with some other musician friends of yours. But what what was I going to say? I
Well, I
can't
mean,
be doing this
go
at
ahead.
my age. I can't believe I lose my train of thought that easy. That's crazy.
No, I can pick up. You know, where as musicians, like when you write a song, it's not because you kind of feel something about that topic. It's not like you are kind of into it or whatever. Like you are super into that topic, and it's super, it means, I mean, it's so emotional with inside you that you have to just get it out into song. That's like what musicians do. I'm sure artists are the same. I'm sure a lot of people are like that. You know, if you have something so overwhelming, I mean, people cry, people get mad. I mean, that's an aspect of it, you know, pouring out as far as, you know, kind of visually.
Hmm.
Um, but so when I started to look into the flat earth stuff, I started to question, well, if flat earth is actually the truth, then that means that the other people that are telling us that it's a spinning ball, that means by default that they're lying. And so if they're lying, well, what are they lying about? What are the lies? You know, what evidence do you have to prove that they're lying? What do they say when they're you know, confronted about these lies? And what do they have to profit from the lies? All these questions like started to formulate in my head. And so what do? I just started to research and just started to listen to other people, you know, what they have to say, and, you know, the lack of evidence. Um, one of the big thing, okay, the whole NASA conspiracy, it's so deep and it's so in depth and it goes so far. And do I think everyone in first of all, do I think everyone in NASA is in on it all on the conspiracy to fool us? No, I don't think that, because it's decompartmentalized. Just because the management or whatever are telling the minions to do something, it doesn't really mean that the minions doing those services really understand what those services are attributing to. Right? They could say
Right,
clean.
it's different components to actually make up the bigger whole. So you're just focused in your little petri dish,
Yeah,
and you manufacture whatever you're supposed to be manufacturing, and then
you
you hand
clock
that
in,
off.
clock out, and go home. Yeah, and
Right,
you're just
exactly. And that way, it's much more manageable to keep the secret intact or keep the lie going, because not you can't have that many people working for a huge organization like NASA, and not let the I mean clearly secrets are getting out. People are
they
telling their
are.
side of the stories. You know.
but I'm pretty confident that if you take a government position, you're scared to death to talk.
Oh, come on,
My
that's a given, absolutely.
my uncle worked for some government, Boeing and some other companies. He won't say
Mhm,
anything. He won't. I ask him questions about satellites and stuff like that. He won't
mhm,
say anything because I think that when they take those positions, whether they're signing something or whatever, if they tell them something or something, I know he's like he's so he I think he's like super scared. He thinks that if he says something, he knows for a fact that they're monitoring his phones and they can pick up on words and have a computer basically alert somebody that you said these words, and then they can get that
yeah,
conversation. It's that easy nowadays, and people don't even
right,
realize
right.
it's that
Well,
easy.
yeah,
But
when you have people like Bob Lazar, like I don't know if either of you have read about him or watched any of his interviews or whatever. Like, dude, that guy's led a crazy life, because he worked at Area 51, and a lot of the stuff that like how he got recruited for Area 51 and all this stuff. Like they like back then, I think it was like in the 80s or whatever. Like his life was pretty much erased from the books. Like there were still things that were missed and everything because not everything was digital. But like his existence from I think like one of the schools that he went to, like his records were like it looked like he never attended. He was like there was one version that somebody had of like the employee handbook or directory, and Bob Lazar was in there. And then like when they went to talk to whoever, and this is like just paraphrasing the information, like they had no record of him ever being employed there at the base and stuff like that. So Bob Lazar like has been persecuted for everything that he's talked about aliens and technology, and I mean we see how we treat whistleblowers like Edward Snowden.
Snowden.
Ed,
Yeah.
Edward Snowden, is that right?
Yeah.
yep.
I feel like that's not his first name, but yeah, Edward Snowden.
So along that same line of thinking, um, if you start to look at the Apollo program, it gets super creepy. The Apollo group before Apollo 11. So I don't. I think it's Apollo 11. Was Apollo 11 the first to say that they went to the moon?
Uh, I'm not sure.
I can't remember, but
Yeah, perhaps.
whoever was the first one, the crew prior to them, right?
Hmm.
It's super sad. Do you guys know what happened to them? The
No.
crew, the crew prior to the one that was quote unquote
Oh.
successful.
No.
So they were testing out. So the astronauts were testing out the equipment and stuff like that, and they were in the rocket. It's so sad. They were in the rocket, and the guys talking to one of the astronauts is talking to the guys in the tower, and he's like, what, Mike, can you hear me?" And then the astronaut goes, "Man, how are we supposed to get to the moon if we can't even talk to each other between buildings?" And do you know what happened to that crew?
No,
They
I'm assuming they got disbanded.
they were getting ready to take off, and quote unquote fire started in their hatch in their compartment, and they were already locked inside, and they all burned to death.
Oh, no way.
That's
And
crazy.
during the same time, there was this guy that worked for NASA. I believe he worked for NASA or one of the other programs that was directly involved with working on this, and he was working as like an oversight kind of safety kind of person or whatever, or something like that. So this guy, don't remember his name, but you can look it up if you want to research it. He wrote a report, a 500-page report before the Apollo mission of them going to the moon. He wrote a 500-page report of every single thing wrong with their whole program and why they would never go to the moon. The guy ends up dead, and that report goes
Missing.
away. Yep.
Huh.
And then So they have all of these issues, right? They can't even talk. They can't even communicate to each other between buildings, right? Because their signals are so weak because their technology just sucks like back then. And they want us to believe that 2 years later, they not only can talk to each other between buildings now, but they can lift a rocket off of Earth successfully, go all the way to the moon, go through all these quote unquote Van Allen radiation belts, make it to the moon, land on the moon, go around, and your whatever Jeep thing works on the moon, and then you get back into something that's able to rocket off the moon again. And not only that, but you are then able to go 230,000 miles back to Earth, and then you re-enter the Earth's atmosphere in your little dinker, tin can, and the protects you from things that would have solid steel be molten in 2 seconds, but your capsule withstands this heat, and then it's brought to a slower stop with parachutes, and it's all success, and there's no problem. And like there's so many issues with that. The chances of nothing going wrong in that mission, it's it's just laughable. I don't even have to I shouldn't even have to defend something like that. I shouldn't even have to argue about something like that.
Well, let me ask you this. So this happened like several years ago, and it was kind of big in like the, extreme sports world. Do do you think it's possible? Because you agree that we have an atmosphere, right? Like, there's no problem with that belief.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, is it possible for us to go above the atmosphere and be above the atmosphere?
I mean, I just, in my opinion, I don't. I mean, there's people that I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a project. I'm not sure what it's called exactly, but there's all these like random government projects that are named all these different things, and you like hear about them. You're like, that's not real, and then you research. You're like, oh, that is. But I know what it is. Operation Fishbowl. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Uh-uh.
They're like taking
Fishbowl.
rockets
That's yeah. It
and
sounds
nukes,
familiar.
trying to blow up like the firmament with like the rockets.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, do I don't the whole stupidest thing is like, look, we have like unexplored lands. The oceans are like relatively pretty much all unexplored. Like there's places we've never been to, there's animals we haven't seen even on this like earth. Like it's funny because they try to tell us like they know the inner workings of like the earth, right? But then
Mhm.
if you ask or if you research how far is the furthest that anyone has ever dug in the earth, like how far down has anyone ever dug? Like what would you guys think?
I think it's like it's not actually very far. It's like several. It's like a couple of miles, I think.
Like I thought I read something that said 7 miles,
It's
but
something
if
like that.
and if you do that if you take that 7 miles according to their calculation on remember what we were taught, like the crust and the mantle
Mantle.
and the
Yeah.
core and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
they literally are not even scratching on the surface of their crust. That's how
Yeah.
much like
You're right. Humans have drilled over 12 kilometers, which equates to the amazing metric system that we use in this country, 7.67 miles.
which is nothing. I mean,
Mhm.
if look at their numbers as how far and thick that they say the Earth is and stuff, it just doesn't make any sense.
Hmm.
Another thing on the flat Earth, try to take like observable things and just use common sense to like don't use your common sense. Don't try to like make up pseudoscience to answer something that you want to be true, right? Like, oh, I want this to be true, and so I'm going to make up something that allows me to say, well, because of gravity, such and such is happening. Well, you would have to prove gravity is actually a thing in order to be able to like utilize that. And gravity can't be proven. You can't prove something that like gravity. It's not. It's just a theory.
Well, how is that possible that you can't prove it? Because I mean, and the only reason why I ask is because, again, you know, the and just for the sake of the episode, we'll say that the indoctrination of these concepts of gravity and what keeps us from being able to jump up as hard as we can and fly and or float or whatever, or what brings things back down to earth when we throw them up, or what keeps car tires on the road when we're driving around. How does that not prove gravity, or
Because
are we
gravity,
talking about different things?
the concept of what do you guys like? What's the definition concept of gravity? Like, what's the whole concept of it?
That it keeps things on the surface
Why?
from floating out into outer space.
Like,
Well,
why
it's
though?
the whole the bigger the mass that has a gravitational pull. So
Exactly.
even
Exactly.
smaller objects, yeah.
Exactly. And so they want you to believe that the earth is so large that the mass of the earth is what pulls everything towards it. But how do you prove that? How do you prove that? That's not provable. Something like that's just a theory. Because if you want to do scientific experiments and try to prove this theory, how would you ever prove that? You're going to try to tell me that you get to a certain point and like so let's just say with a golf ball. If I pour water on the side of the golf ball, what's going to happen to the
It's
water?
gonna go up. It's gonna
Okay. So let's get a
basically
bigger
like
mass. Let's do a tennis ball and I pour water over it. What's going to happen to the water?
I'm just gonna roll off the sides of
And then
the
so on
sides.
and so forth and so forth, right? And then so,
Right.
so you're telling me like I need a really, 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 really big ball, and then it happens? No, it doesn't work like that, buddy.
Wait, what's supposed to happen? The fact that it stays on the
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 fact
the
that
tennis ball?
because the mass is so large, now the water is attracted to it. It's pseudoscience.
Well, I mean, couldn't you argue that it's how we said we're like in there's this enclosure, right? Whether that's the atmosphere or whatever the enclosure actually is, right? Couldn't that be what couldn't that be considered as what's keeping it in place, kind of like the whole gravitron effect?
I don't
I
know.
mean,
I
that's
I've done
assuming
a
that you
little.
also believe that the Earth spins too, by itself.
Well, like so the concepts of why we are, why we jump up and we come back down to the earth. There's some I'm not an expert on anything, but what my studies have led me to is um the earth is magnetized, right?
Hmm.
And what that has to do with anything, I don't really know. But the Earth is a negatively charged thing. It's negatively charged. Our atmosphere, the air around us, it's
Hmm.
positively charged. We have compasses that work based on magnetism, right?
Right.
Right.
How does that work? I'm not an expert on anything. I'm not telling you that I know. I
Hmm.
but I
I mean,
don't know.
based on what we know about magnets, right? A positive
Yeah, and,
will
and,
will.
and so if you look at the Earth as like a compass, right?
Hmm.
The the center of the Earth would be flat Earth's north, which would be the center. So anytime you're going east to west, you are going in a circle. You're going in a circle. I mean, basic, kind of the basic same concept on a globe too. I mean, you're going
Hmm.
around
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's
Yeah.
kind of the same concept, but east and west, it's you're going in a circle, like you're making a ring or whatever. And the
Right.
center of that is north, and which what is positively charged, and then the outer ring, the whole outside of it, it's all negatively charged. And then that's how compasses work.
Huh.
I don't know.
Interesting.
that's my theory. I'm not saying that I know that for a fact, but when you
Right.
start to think about compasses and stuff like that, and the whole like fact that the Earth is negatively charged and the atmosphere and the air is positively charged, makes you question.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Well, the example that I was gonna mention was so what had happened was this I think the athlete or whatever, the extreme sports guy was, he was sponsored by Red Bull, and so what he did was he got up to above the atmosphere over the earth, and he jumped and he skydived. Basically, he free falled back from the right above the atmosphere back to earth. And they filmed this, and he's standing. It was like he was on the diving board. I'd have to watch the video again, but it was like he was on the diving board of a satellite or something, and then like he just kind of like and jumped off. And again, like I get it. It's easy to limit the view of what you see, or what viewers can see, an audience can see when you're filming, right? Unless you're just doing like the panning everywhere to get every single angle or whatever. So I think what the purpose for my question is that was supposed to be the highest free fall skydive, was from right above the atmosphere. And not saying that was true or false or whatever, like he really did it. I was just kind of curious to know if you thought that would actually be possible, to kind of exit that layer or whatever you want to call it. I'm so like my reality has been kind of broken today, guys. So I don't know what to call things anymore. But
my reality's been broken today.
So I don't even know if I really exist at this point. But anyway, so like he free falls in back through the atmosphere. Now, if Tom Hanks has taught me anything, and Bill Paxton and Kevin Bacon, like when something comes back through the atmosphere, it catches fire or it bounces off.
Because of the friction or whatever?
Yeah, well, because you're coming,
friction.
yeah, like it's something, but the reason why the capsule on reentry has to be so insulated in the way that it is, and has this like protective layer of tinfoil that protects them from being incinerated. You have to come in at the right trajectory in order to penetrate the atmosphere to get back in, or else if not, you're going to bounce off like a stone on a pond, right? So, and this guy's right above the atmosphere, and he jumps off and is able to free fall back through the atmosphere down to earth, and survived and didn't catch fire. So I was just curious if you knew about that, or how does that like make any sense, if it does or does not. I don't know.
I don't pay too much attention to all that kind of stuff. All of it's just, there's so much in our lives that are just there to distract us and keep us entertained. I think that's one of them. I mean, one of the aspects of just the full deception and just constant deception is the ISIS.
Mm-hmm.
They like keep showing you people playing guitars and eating food in space, and their hair stands up and looks like it's hairsprayed for some reason in space, and they like to do backflips for some reason in space a lot. And I don't know, it's just it's like now that Chris guy is always playing guitar and singing a song, and it's like, wait, what's the whole point of you guys being up there to begin with? Is it just to let us see food flying in the air and you catch it in your mouth? And it doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you
It's
guys...
entertainment. It's not necessarily for the purpose of information or science or whatever. Like you said, those types of things, seem really insignificant to
Why
be compared to, like, you're in outer space, dude. Like, not everybody else gets to go out there, and we're watching food float into your
they're
mouth.
not
Like,
even in outer space?
no, I understand. I'm just saying, like,
They'll even tell you that
there's
in and out.
more important thing, like in the whole aspect of the lie or the deception of space or whatever, and them being actually up there. Like if that were to be true, right, and they're up there, like, dude, that's what we want to know about. But now, but instead, we're watching you let food float into your mouth or water, liquid float into your mouth. Like it seems like like a sideshow trick, right?
Yeah. Do you know what
Like
they
a
also
really bad magician show.
they also use it to instill fear in us. And one of those techniques is, like, what do they say happened to the dinosaurs?
Asteroid hit the Earth
That,
and blocked out
yeah,
the sun.
exactly. The asteroid hit the Earth. And just like 2 months ago, NASA put out like an article that was warning everybody about an asteroid coming to the Earth that was the size of the United States or something like that, right? Just to
Mhm.
like, what to, so you have video of this asteroid that you're showing us, or you just have a picture that somebody made on a computer, and you have this story about an asteroid that's going to destroy the Earth possibly, and we need. I mean, it's just like, so that's what you guys are there for
Oh, well, and
to.
that's something that's very interesting too that you say that, because why mention it if and say that it could possibly hit the Earth. So as far as I understand what we know, what we've been told about space, um, is that if something like an asteroid, that's going to be on a straight path, right? The path of the angle that is traveling shouldn't change. There's no wind, there's no oxygen in space, so there's nothing that would really move it unless something bigger. It was to bounce off something bigger. So how did they calculate that it could potentially hit the Earth? Like it's either going to or it's not,
Did you guys
right?
see that whole black hole thing that came out like 2 years ago?
Maybe.
They were like so excited, right? They're like, we finally did it. We have a picture of the black hole. We have a picture of a black hole. And we're putting the images together, and we're going to have the image out for you guys relatively shortly. And this like 20-year-old girl or something like put it together or something and released the image. It is the funniest thing you've ever seen in your life. It's like this orange circle with like some black in it or something like that. Like a little kid
Yeah,
did it
it's
on a
like this
computer.
very faint, like orange ring, and then like this just black
Yeah.
center.
And they wanted everyone to be like, "This is amazing!" Like, what? This makes no sense, dude. And you know how much money NASA gets a day?
It's like in the billions, isn't it, or millions?
No, $59 million a day.
Jesus.
Ugh.
It's probably more now because I think Trump like increased it. But
Well,
Yeah,
dude, we got a
there's Space
space force now. Yeah, dude. Like, are you kidding me? Can you sign me up for that, dude? Like, defending the galaxy, like Star Wars. That's my stuff right there, dude.
so NASA will admit that they don't have an actual photo of Earth, and this is something that no one talks about. But
Really?
like, look at a photo of Earth that NASA sends to us throughout the years. They always change. They change colors. They change sizes. The continents change. Look at it and then compare them with like images that Russia leak or give out, and then China, and compare them all. You have like 50 different Earths. Like, which one's the real one? But NASA admits that they have a blue ball, blue ball, a blue
This
marker
guy.
that
Yeah, people that
um,
work at NASA would have. Nah.
yeah, he actually admits that he's the guy that composites. So they see that the Earth is so large, right? That they have strips of images, and then they have to put all the strips of images together that create the photo. So it's all CGI. Everything you see is all fake. It's all made on a computer. Everything they show you of all the planets, Neptune, Saturn, their anus, all that.
Chris, I love
all,
you, dude. The jokes are so subtle. I love it, dude. That's great.
all of them, they're all CGI. They're all basically someone taking it and putting it into a computer and then painting it pretty much and making it something that it's not. And they'll admit
Huh.
it. So there's no actual real photo of Earth. And so
That's bizarre.
people say, well, what about satellites? And what about all the images that they take? And I say, okay, well, let's talk about satellites. Satellites all are based on the theory of what? Gravity, right? And the fact that you can push something far enough out into Earth's orbit and push it into a trajectory that it's going just the amount of speed to stay where it's at, that it doesn't fly away from the Earth, yet it also is being pulled at the just perfect amount of Earth's gravity that it stays in that trajectory and continues to grow around the Earth in a circle, right? Like it just constantly, that's what they say satellites are. They just say that they're constantly up there. Okay, first of all, there's no video or footage anywhere, and you would see it everywhere on ISIS, on any footage of all of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of satellites that they've put up there since they said that they started putting them up there.
Mhm.
There would be garbage beyond garbage of satellites crashing into other satellites and all this stuff happening, or you would at least see them all, right, on like live footage of like ISIS or anything. There's nothing there. There's no satellites. So when I started to look into satellites, I started to come across the thing of, well, how do they get them up into up into the sky and stuff like that? Well, I noticed that there are some times when they do these, I call them shows, when they do
Mhm.
these things of where they send them off into a rocket, right?
Mhm.
And no one knows where the rocket goes. No one sees what happens to the rocket. And everyone just presumes that, yeah, it was shot into trajectory into space, right? But no one actually
Mhm.
knows where it goes. So a huge majority of satellites that are put into the sky, and it's admitted, and there's articles and photos after photos after articles after articles, they're satelloons. Satelloons. And satelloons are basically the computers, the satellite dishes and all, whatever the computers are and stuff, the cameras. And they
Mhm.
basically they're put into the sky with huge, massive helium balloons, like helium balloons the size of like football fields kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And so those, I'm 100% sure they can put all of those in the sky that they ever want to. It's super cheap. It's super quick. They don't have to do all their rocket stuff and everything. They just go out into the middle of nowhere and just, fill up the balloons with helium, and there they go. And sure, you can get images and stuff like that sent back to you. Sure, I have no problem with that. But satellites, I have a problem with.
Hmm.
Interesting. So, in that respect, how do we get
GPS.
GPS and like satellite TV and stuff like that? Like, where does that play? How does that work out?
I don't know, but they would have to prove to me that those satellites are, I mean, if you think about the concept, it's like it's it's so it's so sci-fi, but we've watched so many sci-fi movies that our brains kind of process it as something that's kind of, oh, that could happen, when in reality, like, no, that could never happen, right? Like,
Right.
so they want you to believe that we're spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, going 11,000 miles per hour around the sun, all while they can shoot these satellites into space and have them be perfectly positioned, once, like I explained before, how it's not being pulled, it's not shooting out into space, and it's not being pulled into the earth by earth's gravity. And you want me to believe that all this is happening while they're in the just perfect place for you guys to get reception? I don't know. That sounds crazy to me. What sounds more reasonable and to me would be towers. They would use towers like they are doing today. I mean, they want to put 5G towers everywhere in the world nowadays, even though I'm a huge against 5G. But
Hmm.
why do they want to put towers everywhere? Why are they putting 4G towers everywhere and 5G towers everywhere? Do you know how 99.8% of all communication is done through the internet, and communication is done throughout the world? Do you guys know how it's
Huh.
processed, how we communicate with one country to say to like Europe or something?
No.
Uh-uh.
Have you guys ever heard of submarine cables?
Oh, did you post that just the other day?
Yeah, I
Yep.
keep
Huh.
doing it once in a
What is that?
while. So
There's like specific places in the ocean that they drop that they have to like meticulously and carefully like place these cables that span oceans. How thick are the wires?
they're huge. They're insanely huge, and they're done by like huge ships, like huge ships. And it says that they can go as far down as Mount Everest is high.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
There, it's like this massive highway of underwater cables that links the whole world together. We're basically a motherboard that's been put together.
Wow, that's insane. I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
And they're called submarine cables.
yeah, and it's
Sorry.
completely 100% everyone. I mean, it's not everyone admits it, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like
That
they ask,
is so
how does all the
bizarre.
communication happen? I say cables,
So it's
towers.
not even through. So it's all through hardwired cable, not even through
Yeah,
wireless satellite.
exactly.
And then we get the signal from the towers that are on land, basically, right?
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
hardwired too. But
And
if
yeah.
but I mean, it's crazy, right? Like after you research like submarine cables, like how you felt right before you researched it, like it kind of seems like it's crazy, right? Like, nah, it doesn't make any sense. But then you're like, oh, yeah, that makes
So yeah,
sense.
I'm looking
Look,
at the
I'm
submarinecablemap.com. This is crazy.
I'm not. There came a point in time. Look, the way that I got saved, right, was because I really there's something about secret societies that like fascinated me, right? And from there, obviously the most common is like the Freemasons, and then you get into Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission and all that kind of stuff, right? And then obviously you're going to arrive at some point, whether early on or not, the Illuminati. And so I used to research and read everything I could about secret societies and all that kind of stuff. And I even got into the 13 bloodlines, and almost got a little deep into David Icke's theory about these reptilian humanoid guys and whatever. But it was just fascinating to me. I was able to separate what I could see happening and what was plausible, and what was just kind of like that seemed like really kind of far off. But I think what happened was my grandma, who was a big Christian influence in my life when I was young, at a young age, was telling me about the Book of Revelation, and so the imagery that came out of there was something that was always very like grandiose to me, and I could not figure out how, as a global population and people with brains and everything, with the idea that they can think on their own, could not read the book of Revelation and would allow the things that we know that are signs that we're looking out for to actually come to fruition and play out. You would think that somebody would be like, nope, we're not going to do that. But granted, I did not take into consideration that, like, well, this is all part of God's plan, so nobody's going to stop this. It's just we're on this runaway train, and we're going to ride this thing out to the end, right? So the back to the imagery, I could not figure out like how, as a global population, we would all, how we could control everybody to believe in a one world religion, how we could get sucked into a one world monetary system, a one world government, and all this kind of stuff, right? It seemed very impossible for the longest time. And then when I started researching secret societies and what was going on, what would they talk about in the Bilderberg conventions and Bohemian Grove and the Trilateral Commission, all this kind of stuff, right? And then looking at the people that like control wealth and like that make decisions, on how we function globally. It really started to open my eyes, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like now I can see how some of this stuff is happening, right? Or could happen, right? And this was like 11 years ago, almost 12 years ago now. And so once that became clear to me, I was just like, whoa, I need to get my stuff together because I cannot keep playing around like this because like it became real at that point, right? And then fast forward, now we have cryptocurrency, right?
Mm.
Clearly, that's an easy go, you know, to be our one world monetary system. Clearly, that could usher in the ability or the necessity to chip an entire population so we can buy, sell, and trade and function that way financially and economically. Then we have the impact that um, the group ISIS made on the world stage, right? Where they came in with this ferocity, and they were taking over so much, you know, land basically, and enforcing their way of life, their belief, and attracting more and more people through their recruitment efforts and stuff like that. And how much of that is actually true is a whole nother story. Like, I have my own opinions on that, but like that was pretty eye opening as far as like a one world religion approach, right? Um, and so coming to these conclusions about how we're operating in the world and what we see and what we believe, the Bible talks about a great deception in the end times and stuff like that, and you I think what people have a hard time with something like flat Earth is the questions we've kind of foundationally laid out. Why? How do they pull this off? Why would they lie to everybody? What's the purpose? What does somebody gain from this? Why how do they keep this under wraps as much as they do? And it's just like everything else. Like, you're either a sheep or you're a free thinker. So you either let it go and you just stay in your lane and don't ask questions and don't buck the system, or you find a problem with what you're being fed and you start to question it and you want and demand and deserve answers, right? So I can totally see how this all plays out to the effect of why we are indoctrinated to believe that we're on this sphere, where it's a globe, it's spinning around the sun, and we're spinning ourselves, and all this kind of stuff. Like, I can totally see how manufactured these things that we're told throughout our lives can be implemented, and how we can believe them so easily without really questioning it. Because I mean, who are we really going out doing these experiments?
No.
Like proving NASA wrong. Like, okay, well, let's find out a way to make this work here on Earth to prove this theory. No, we're relying on information that is from other parties and making that our position.
And it's even crazier than that, though. It's like, not only do the majority of the people just believe what they're telling them, just without doing their own research themselves,
Hmm.
but they're basically calling anyone that doesn't believe what they say and take it as truth. They're basically calling them, stupid and moronic, and like, you don't know, you're an idiot, and oh, you don't even listen to the scientists and stuff like that. I'm like, you're backing up somebody that you haven't even like confirmed what they're telling you is the truth or not.
Right.
Like, do you know
Yeah,
what you're saying?
this Dr. Fauci guy. Like, not to get back on the pandemic, but like, I just read an article yesterday, and granted, it's just an article, not saying it's truth or anything like that. But he financially backed the
Yeah,
Wuhan laboratory that supposedly COVID-19 came from.
yeah, gave
Yep.
him 3 million or something.
Find that very interesting, and now he's like the number one source on coronavirus and all this kind of stuff. So I don't believe in partisan parties. I mean, you could call me a Republican if you really want to, but I don't really believe any politician, honestly. Um,
There's a
but
meme out there right now, and it's like, it has Republican and Democrat, and you're supposed to check one, but then there's another checkbox, and it's checked, and it says, I don't,
I don't believe in cults.
yeah,
Yeah, I saw that one today. Yeah, no, for
So,
real. I mean, that's what it honestly feels like, and these the mystery religion that is kind of like this secret cabal or whatever is kind of fascinating to me in the respect of who's involved in that and what is actually being so secret, and I think it's the greater knowledge that we don't know or we don't possess yet, right? It's the things that limit our ability to be completely free as far as like our thoughts and know honestly like what is we all agree information's power, right? So if we don't have all the information, we don't have as much power as the person that does have all the information, right? And the mystery religion and all this kind of stuff of like ancient Egypt and all that kind of stuff. Again, like I said, it's fascinating. So again, and you can call it a stretch all you want. I'm not saying this is true or what, but this is just kind of like thoughts that I've had regarding this. These I think are kind of the things that are known but not known to everybody, and with that knowledge limits control of the control that others can have over the mass population, right? Because essentially that's what I think it all boils down to is control. If you're given these guidelines and these rules, that we have to operate in, and this is just the way it is. This is the way nature works, or this is the way the universe works because science and blah 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 blah. Then we don't have any room to say, well, then that's how it works. That's the way it is, and we just walk on and move on with our lives. We don't have the opportunity to question and say, well, no, that doesn't make sense. Why is
yeah,
this? And I think, and maybe it's just me, but I also think that we downgrade the capability and intellect of ancient civilizations to the point where because they didn't have the kind of tools that we have now, like they didn't have computers or they didn't have steel, and they worked with stones and sticks. I think that's a little off base because
yeah,
so many foundational aspects of our
yeah,
existence and our knowledge come from that.
yeah,
So if they were that stupid, like how did we arrive? I mean, I'm all for like our ability to create and evolve in our way of thinking and how we can figure things out and problem solve. But I think we diminish their intellect so much because they didn't have the tools that we had, so they weren't as smart. So
well,
we know more than they did.
yeah, it's funny that people base their someone else's like wisdom worth or whatever based on all that kind of stuff. It's based on if how good of technology you can create or what kind of science answers that you can create. But we know that true wisdom is the fear and knowledge of God.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the wisest people that have ever lived are those that understand that God is the creator and we need to be in submission to him. Those are the ones that we need to look and hold up as being wise.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, Chris, is there anything else that you really can like unpack? Because I don't know how much time you got.
Yeah, my wife's giving me the cancel.
What's that?
My wife's giving me the cutoff sign.
Okay, well, we don't want to make her mad.
But
So then, what we'll
yeah,
do is we'll wrap up with this. I want people to know where they can find because you're the project is the Great Deception, right?
yeah, NASA the Great Deception. It's on YouTube, or you can just find me, Christopher McCracken, on Facebook if you want to follow some of my posts and stuff and have conversations with me. That's cool. It is all about just to like wrap up my thoughts. It
Mhm.
is pretty much just all about planting seeds. I've changed in my life a lot with this kind of stuff. It's about preaching God's word, about a lot of stuff. I mean, if we're looking to convince people about something that we truly believe, we have to do it with nourishment, with love, and with gentleness. No farmer ever goes out there and plants the seed and then just waters them to death and pounds them and yells at them, telling them to grow. The farmer takes his time and plows tends the soil and waters them with what they need and gives them the right amount of sunlight. And we need to do the same thing with all the seeds that we plant, whether it's talking about, lies and exposing people in, political parties or, whatever it is, or whether we're preaching God's word. We should just do it out of love and kindness. And I think that will help the seeds to grow and to start producing for themselves at that point. And there's a lot of scripture, and there's other studies you can do with flat Earth, and you can definitely dive into scripture. Just one last thought I want to, put in everyone's mind, just because I think about it sometimes, and it just interests me. If we are on a ball Earth, and you guys might think this is funny or whatever, but if we are on a ball Earth, when Jesus comes again, how does this passage make any sense? For as lightning flashes and lights up the sky from one side to the other, so will the Son of Man be in the day. We know that when Jesus comes again, all the nations are going to see him. They're all going to bow. We're all going to see him at the same time. And I just, something that's curious to me, if like we're all going to see him at the same time and he's coming down from heaven and we're going to witness that all together. How are the people on the other side of the ball going to see it if we're seeing him coming down on the other side of the ball?
Stop it. That's crazy.
I know it's dumb, and people say, well, he's going to light up the whole universe and we're going to see him everywhere. And it's like, all right, well, just food for thought. That's just something that I always runs through my head.
Well, let me ask you this, Chris. Would you mind coming back and doing another episode in the future?
That was exactly my thought. We need a part 2 to this.
Yeah.
And perhaps a part 3, maybe.
Because there's still so much to dive into, and like I don't want to take any more time away from our families. Which, by the way, gentlemen, thank you so much for dedicating 2.5 hours to be away from your family just to do this. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah,
my wife supports it.
Oh, good, Jeffrey.
Oh no, I'm just saying. No, it's all good. My wife supports it.
That's awesome. But yeah, would you come back and do another episode with us, Chris?
Yeah, you guys are a blast to talk to. I enjoyed this, even if no one even listens to it.
Yeah, we have no clue who's going to listen to this. Like, I'm over here acting like when we wrap up these episodes, like, hey, thanks everybody for listening, just to like kind of like I guess have that as a track, like thanks in advance if you ever decide to listen. But I don't know if anybody other than ourselves are going to listen to this. So yeah,
I think if you cut it right and have the conversations continually flowing, I think you'll get a lot of listeners.
Oh, I hope so. I think that'd be kind of cool. This is just we're just out to have fun and make a space for people to that I have interesting stories and perspectives and stuff like that I guess wouldn't necessarily have a platform and to show and to teach other people that like, dude, we can have disagreeing perspectives, yet we can still have a civilized conversation and still be cool with each other. You know what I mean? And not like want to kill each other and hate each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole premise.
One more thing, if you are going on to like Facebook and you want to join groups and stuff like that and actually try to learn stuff, just know that Facebook is kind of a bad place to go because there's a lot of like the Flat Earth Society. It's not run by people that believe in flat Earth. It's run by people that don't believe in flat Earth, and all they do every single time you post something like say like water is always level, and you post some like research on like water flat levels, they'll just like every single post they just make fun of you and just belittle you and just to try to put you down.
The shills.
Yeah, it's like a psyop or something like that. Which is
well, speaking of that, really quick, and then I promise I'll let you guys go. Not trying to hold you hostage, but did anything ever come out of that unscrupulous character that was parked outside of your house?
You know what? Hey, at least I was right. But it's funny because my wife just started a new job as like she's like is like a interior door sales person or whatever like that, and like he was supposed to pick like it was like her new boss or manager or something like that, and I had no idea he was coming over. And instead of him just like rolling up and ringing the doorbell and asking for the check that Lauren had that he was supposed to give her. He just sat in his car and just stared at the door the whole time. And I have no idea who this guy is. I'm trying to text Lauren like, hey, is there someone coming over, something like that? She's not answering me. So I'm just like, I mean, I don't know what else to think. I was starting to think like my 12-year-old daughter was, or 11-year-old daughter was like talking to somebody on the, I started to like freak out. Like, is she talking to a guy on the internet? And now this guy's here.
Well, dude, you had, I'm no joke. I kid you not. And I think I probably, I don't know. I think I deleted the picture, but I snapshotted it on my phone because I was like, dude, if something happens to Chris, I got to tell people, like, dude, they're going to wipe his Facebook and like this photo's going to be gone. So I literally snapshotted it and I had it in my phone, in my picture gallery on my phone for like months, dude. And I was just like, I'm going to solve the mystery. I'm gonna solve the mystery. If Chris ever disappears, like, we know exactly what he looks like. So yeah, dude. I just wanted to double check in on that. But so it's just your wife's boss.
Yeah, nothing
Good.
else.
Okay, that now it makes me feel better that I got rid of that picture and it wasn't for. It was a worthless picture. So okay.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, hey, gentlemen, again, thank you so much. Coach JQ, thank you so much for hosting again with me. We're going to do some more episodes together. Chris is going to come back. Go check out NASA: The Great Deception Project on YouTube. Hit Chris up. Be respectful. Be nice, of course. But he's definitely somebody that you can open up and talk to about that if you have questions or disbeliefs or whatever. And other than that, you guys have a good one, guys. Anything else?
Peace. God bless.
You too, Chris.
Yeah.
Love you, brother.
Peace out, and everyone just have good conversations and keep it nice.
Keep it civil. Amen. Amen. All right, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.